There are wildflowers everywhere.
We're going to be taking a walk this morning in a woodland called Emmons Woods. It has a conservation easement on it through the Illinois Nature Preserve Commission, and it's a perfect spot to see the spring ephemerals because it's almost completely wooded. It's been preserved because of its canopy. There are lots of birds to hear here and see, and then to see all the spring ephemerals, which this is where the action is in the springtime, and later in the season it will move into the prairies, but right now the place to be is in the woodlands. One of the early signs of spring, there's spring beauties. They are probably the second to come out after hepaticas. They are white with pink stripes, sort of peppermint looking, very pretty, delicate, a lovely little spring flower. So Dutchman's Breeches are another early spring flower that come out about the same time as the spring beauties, and they're called that because they look like they're hanging upside down, but they look like what people said the pants that Dutchman wore. And what's interesting about them, you can see that the pollen and such is at the bottom end, and bumblebees come along and they can hold on to the flower head. The pollen they'll rub their bellies against the pollen and carry it to the next flower, and that's how they pollinate other Dutchman's breeches.
Oh, there's the skunk cabbages.
So here we have one of the first signs of spring. It's called skunk cabbage, and it will even come up through the snow. So depending on the winter, we might see it in late February or March. Here you can see it's grown up quite a bit, and it has really interesting flowers, which you can see here. That is so cool to see.
Wow.
They were not even in this area when I grew up here. Wow. You see all that green over there?
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry to say that is honeysuckle.
We're in the woods pulling and cutting Asian honeysuckle. So the wildflowers that cover the floor, they need sunlight in the spring, and this is one invasive plant that will take over, capture all the sunlight, comes up really early, and it would starve out the native wildflowers from blooming. So this one, when they're little, you can pull them out. When they're larger, like this one, then we cut them off. And keep that sunlight from coming down to the forest floor, so we can coat the forest floor with the quality native species. You can see on these branches how the leaves are opposite each other, and they will look like almost like a ladder of rungs as it comes down these branches that make it pretty easy to identify.
And then you said they're one of the first to have leaves.
The green leaves in the spring. This is a good one over here. This is called Gooseberry. So the leaves on these are more rounded and scalloped. These are long, narrow, and a bright green. If you are not sure about the plants on your property, the Conservation at Home program will send somebody out. I'll come out to the property and help you identify what's what, so we can continue down the eco-friendly route.
Another early sign of spring are the wild onions. So you can pick one, smell it. It smells like onion. They're edible. You want to eat them? So that's always exciting to see the onions.
See and smell the onions.
See and smell the onions. Yes, indeed. So here we have another member of the onion family, and these are wild leeks. Also edible, but they are slow to reproduce, so it's really not good to harvest very many of them. If you're on private property, you shouldn't harvest really anything in a forest preserve. But I wanted to show you the leeks, which are also onions. So one of the really important things about spring ephemerals, which grow in the woodland area, is that they come out before the leaves have come out on the trees, so they're getting plenty of sunshine, and in a very short amount of time they are growing up, flowering, setting seed, and then most of them disappear until next spring. So that's why it's so exciting to see them, because it comes once a year. What's also important about them is that they provide nectar and such for the insects, which start coming out when the temperature gets above 50 or 55 degrees. So when we first started our walk this morning, we weren't seeing a lot of insects, but now that it's warmed up a bit, we're seeing bees all over this patch of false rue anemone and spring beauties. Here's some trout lilies. You'll notice some of them have single leaves, but this one has a bud. It takes about 7 years for a trout lily to mature, and you'll always see 2 leaves when it actually flowers. Because there are a number of spring ephemerals that where the seeds have to be in the ground for a number of years before they actually sprout and start to flower and reproduce. And so if you're interested in adding spring ephemerals to your woodland garden or the north side of your house where it's shadier, it's always better to buy the plants already full grown, because otherwise if you try to put in just seeds, you'll be waiting a long time to see the results. And at the Conservation Foundation, we can help you get plants if you just give us a call.